Here, today we are discussing one question from macroeconomics. Question is here, how will you derive the real aggregate demand curve using new classical theory? This question is asked in 2018. Actually, this question, before discussing these questions, we need to discuss a little more about Keynesian theory as well as how the new classical model was developed. So new classical is on based on rational expectation hypothesis. Rational expectation of hypothesis. Rational expectation of hypothesis basically mean put forward by Robert Locus. So actually, what uh, basic theory propounded by this new classical, as per new classical economics, that real variable such as output, employment, real variable as per classical economics, real variable such as output, employment, all are basically cannot be stabilized by management of aggregate demand through monetary as well as fiscal policy. So in accordance with classical economics, real variable such as output, employment cannot be stabilized by the adjustment of aggregate demand through monetary policy and fiscal policy. This is the basic fundamental of new classical theory. Now we know, as per Keynes model, say this one Keynes model aggregate supply curve, and this one aggregate demand curve, which is the summation of consumption, investment and government expenditure. Now certain amount of output is determined here. In order to increase employment or output, aggregate demand should be enhanced or aggregate demand must be boosted. So this aggregate demand as per Keynes can be boosted by either increasing the investment, that will be the monetary policy, or by increasing the government expenditures, that will be the fiscal policy. So either increase in investment or government expenditure, there will be the effect of multiplier. Through the process of multiplier effect, aggregate demand or aggregate output will increase. And hence employment also be increase. This is the basic foundation of Keynes model. But as per new classical economics, this output and employment, this variable cannot be stabilized by adjusting the aggregate demand through the process of monetary policy, either monetary policy or fiscal policy. Now our question is here, how we can derive the real aggregate demand curve using the new classical theory. Now how we can derive the aggregate demand curve as per new classical theory? in locus neoclassical aggregate, in locus classical approach, aggregate demand is generally considered, aggregate demand is generally considered as per neoclassical economics or in locus classical approach, aggregate demand is generally considered in terms of quantity theory of money, in terms of quantity theory of money. Therefore, this aggregate demand is equal MV is equal PT. Here you see this M indicating supply of money, V indicating velocity of circulation, of money, P indicating price level, and T, or we can say here T, that is the real output, or we can say it as volume of output or volume of transactions. How much the transaction took place. In terms of growth of the variable, in terms of growth of all variables, we can express this equation in terms of growth. In terms of growth of the variable, the above quantity theory, can be written as M, that is delta M by M is equal delta P by P plus delta Y by Y. So delta M by M, it indicating actually how the money supply, what is the growth in money supply. V, velocity, here velocity, that is V, is assumed to be constant. So we take the velocity as constant and rewrite the above equation, rewrite the above equation we can write this above equation like this: delta P by P is equal delta M minus, upon M minus delta Y upon Y. So delta, here this portion, that is delta Y upon Y, indicates the growth rate, that is G. Here we taken as G and written as G. Then we can write this equation delta P by P delta M upon M minus G. This is the equation. Now, actually this equation indicating what? This equation indicating what? The expected inflation, this one delta P upon P indicating expected inflation rate by the private economic agents. Here private economic agents means we can take like farms workers. They are the private economic agents. That is, this expected inflation rate by the private economic agents will depend upon on the expected growth rate of money supply and expected growth rate of expected growth rate. That is, the expected rate of inflation by private agents. Private agents means farms and workers. Here in economy, farms and workers. Farm and workers. So this expected rate of inflation by the private agents, farms and workers will depend upon the growth in money supply. The growth in money supply. What is growth of money supply? That is delta M upon M, and the growth rate in real output, growth rate of output, that is G. So we can write this equation expected delta P upon P E, expected E indicating expected, delta M by M expected minus expected growth. So a simple this equation, this is how we can derive the aggregate demand as per new classical model. This expected rate of inflation will exactly depend upon the growth rate or growth of money supply as well as growth rate of output produced in the economy. This is the answer of this particular questions. Thank you.